Hello. When I married Lauren, I thought I was marrying my soulmate. We'd been together for 5 years before tying the knot, and life felt easy with her. At least, it used to. Lauren was 34, vibrant and confident, a natural extrovert who could charm anyone in a room. I was 36, quieter, a software engineer who preferred quiet nights to social gatherings. We balanced each other out, or so I thought. We'd just moved into our first house, a two-story place in a suburban neighborhood with enough space for the family we planned to start. Everything should have been perfect, but it wasn't. The first signs of trouble came slowly, almost imperceptibly. Lauren, who used to lounge in pajamas all day on weekends, started dressing up early. I'd wake up to find her fully made up, saying she had errands to run or a new yoga class to attend. At first, I thought nothing of it. It's normal to want to change in routine, right? But then her reasons for leaving the house grew vaguer. "I'll be back later," she'd say, grabbing her keys without looking me in the eye. "Where are you going?" I'd ask, trying not to sound accusatory. "Just meeting some friends," she'd reply with a nonchalant shrug. Then came the phone. Lauren had never been secretive about her phone before. She'd leave it lying around without a second thought. But now it was glued to her hand, the screen dimming before I could glance at it. I caught glimpses of her texting late at night, the screen lighting up her face as she smiled at messages she never showed me. "What's so funny?" I asked once, trying to sound casual. "Just a meme from Sarah," she said, referring to her younger sister, without looking up. But Sarah wasn't much of a texter. The distance between us grew, and I couldn't ignore our late-night talks, cooking together, say, or maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. The breaking point came one Friday night. Lauren told me she was going to Sarah's place to help her with some project. It wasn't unusual for them to spend time together. They were close, despite Sarah being younger and more carefree at 28. But something about the way Lauren said it felt off, like she was trying too hard to sound casual. I decided to text Sarah, just to check in. "Hey, has Lauren made it to your place yet?" There was a pause before Sarah replied, "Lauren? She's not here. Did she say she was coming over?" My stomach dropped. I didn't confront Lauren that night. Instead, I waited, my mind racing. Where was she? Who was she with? By the time she came home, it was past midnight. She looked surprised to see me still up. "You're still awake?" she asked, setting her bag down. "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone even. "How was Sarah's?" Her eyes flicked to mine for a fraction of a second before she smiled. "Good. We just hung out, talked about stuff." I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. The next day, I called Sarah to explain what had happened. She was as confused as I was, insisting she hadn't seen Lauren in days. "Do you think she's cheating on you?" Sarah asked hesitantly. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. "I don't know," I admitted, "but something's going on." I started paying closer attention to Lauren's behavior. Her late nights became more frequent, her excuses flimsier. One evening, I decided to follow her when she left the house. She said she was meeting a friend for dinner, but instead, she drove to a hotel on the edge of town. I parked nearby, watching as she stepped out of the car, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. A man was waiting for her near the entrance. He was tall, well-dressed, and greeted her with a kiss on the cheek that lingered too long. My blood boiled as I watched them walk inside together. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I started collecting evidence, texts, photos, anything I could use to piece together the truth. Lauren's phone was locked, but she wasn't careful about hiding everything. I found receipts for dinners I hadn't attended and a bracelet in her jewelry box I knew I hadn't bought her. I reached out to Sarah again, not knowing where else to turn. "Can we talk?" I asked. "In person?" Sarah agreed, and we met at a coffee shop the next day. She listened as I laid everything out, the late nights, the lies, the hotel. "I'm sorry, Liam," she said, her voice soft. "You don't deserve this." Her sympathy was genuine, but there was something else in her eyes, a flicker of anger that surprised me. "She's been taking you for granted," Sarah added. "If I were her, I'd never treat you like this." Her words lingered in my mind long after we parted ways. That weekend, Lauren left for another work trip, giving me an opportunity to dig deeper. I scoured her email, her social media, even her closet. That's when I found it. A small box tucked away in the back of her wardrobe, filled with keepsakes from someone who wasn't me. A handwritten note lay on top, signed with a name I didn't recognize. My anger simmered, but I kept it bottled up. I needed a plan, and Sarah was about to become part of it. I spent the weekend in a daze, fueled by anger and betrayal. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lauren with that man at the hotel. Her lies echoed in my mind, each one chipping away at the image I'd held of her for so long. But I wasn't going to confront her yet, not until I knew exactly how I wanted to play this. That Sunday, I called Sarah again. "Can you come over?" I asked. "I need to talk." She hesitated. "Is Lauren home?" "No," I said quickly. "She's away. It's just us." Sarah agreed, and an hour later, she was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, her face a mixture of concern and frustration. "What's going on?" she asked. "Did you find out more?" I nodded and slid my phone across the table, showing her the photos I'd taken of Lauren and the man at the hotel. Sarah's eyes widened as she scrolled through the images. That's Greg," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who's Greg?" I demanded. "Her coworker," Sarah explained, her tone bitter. "She's mentioned him before, but I never thought." She stopped herself, her jaw tightening. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "So, she's been lying to both of us." Sarah looked up at me, her expression hardening. "What are you going to do?" I hesitated, then said, "I'm not sure, but I know I'm not letting her get away with it." In the days that followed, Sarah became my confidant. We spent hours texting and calling, strategizing ways to handle the situation. She was angrier than I expected, venting about how Lauren had always been selfish, always taking things for granted. "She doesn't deserve you," Sarah said one night during a particularly heated call. "She's throwing away everything for some guy who probably doesn't even care about her." Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. One evening, Sarah suggested we meet up again, this time at her apartment. "We can talk more freely here," she said. When I arrived, Sarah greeted me with a hug that lasted just a little too long. She was dressed casually, sweatpants and a tank top, but there was an air of ease about her that Lauren had lost long ago. We sat on her couch, a bottle of wine between us, as we went over the evidence I'd collected. Sarah was supportive, offering ideas for how to confront Lauren in a way that would leave no room for excuses. At some point, the conversation shifted. "You know," Sarah said, swirling her wine glass, "I've always thought you deserved better, even before all this." I looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "Lauren's always been complicated. But you're a good guy, Liam. You deserve someone who sees that." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The next day, Lauren returned home, acting as if everything was normal. She kissed me on the cheek, dropped her bag by the door, and went straight to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of wine. "How was your trip?" I asked, my voice neutral. "Exhausting," she replied, not looking at me. Greg was such a pain to work with. The mention of his name made my blood boil, but I kept my composure. "You should take it easy," I said. "I'll handle dinner tonight." Lauren glanced at me, surprised. "That's sweet of you." I forced a smile, knowing she had no idea what was coming. Over the next week, I laid the groundwork for my revenge. I dropped hints about our relationship to mutual friends, letting them know things weren't as perfect as they seemed. I made sure Lauren's sister, Sarah, was always around when Lauren wasn't, giving her more opportunities to vent about her frustrations with her sister and to get closer to me. Sarah was more than willing to play along. "She's so blind," Sarah said one night after Lauren left for another late meeting. "If she had half a brain, she'd realize what she's losing." There was something in the way she said it, a mix of anger and longing, that made me pause. "You're really upset with her, aren't you?" I asked. Sarah looked away, fiddling with the hem of her sweater. "I just hate seeing her treat you like this. You're better than that." One night, Sarah came over under the pretense of helping me organize the garage. We worked side by side, sorting through boxes and old tools. At one point, she picked up a large wrench and held it up with a mischievous grin. couldn't help but laugh, the tension between us easing for a moment. But then, the laughter faded, and Sarah's expression softened. She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. "You know," she said quietly, "you don't have to go through this alone." Her words, her presence, her anger at Lauren, all of it felt like validation, like someone finally understood what I was going through. And that's when I realized my revenge wasn't just about Lauren anymore. It was about taking back control of my life. Lauren's lies were starting to suffocate me, but the time for confrontation was near. I could feel it in the way she moved around the house, her guilt practically radiating off her. She thought she was still in control, that I was blind to her late nights and suspicious errands. But that illusion was about to shatter. Sarah had been over frequently, under the guise of checking in on me. I'd let it happen, letting her presence push the boundaries Lauren didn't even know existed. And Lauren? She didn't suspect a thing. One evening, I made a point of leaving my phone in plain view while Sarah was over. We were in the garage, sorting tools again, when Lauren came home earlier than expected. "Hey," Lauren called out as she stepped inside, her heels clicking on the tile. "We're in here." I shouted back, smirking at Sarah, who raised an eyebrow. When Lauren entered the garage, she froze. Sarah was standing close, holding a wrench in her hands, my big tool. It was an innocent enough scene on the surface, but the tension in the air told a different story. "What's going on?" Lauren asked, her voice sharp. "Just organizing the garage," I replied casually, but the look on her face told me she wasn't buying it. Her eyes darted between me and Sarah, suspicion flickering. I almost laughed at the irony, her paranoia over my supposed affair, while she was the one sneaking around. The next morning, Lauren's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. She'd been careless lately, leaving it unlocked. I picked it up and scrolled through her messages with Greg, my stomach tightening with each line. "Greg, last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." Lauren, "Same. He has no idea." Winky face. It was all the confirmation I needed. I snapped a few screenshots and saved them to my phone. The evidence was airtight. That evening, I called Sarah and asked her to come over. "I'm confronting Lauren tonight," I told her, "but I want you here." Sarah hesitated. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "Yes," I said firmly. "It's time." When Sarah arrived, Lauren was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, surprised to see her sister walk in behind me. "What's she doing here?" Lauren asked, her tone defensive. "We need to talk," I said, setting my phone on the coffee table. Lauren's eyes narrowed. "About what?" I tapped the screen, pulling up the screenshots of her texts with Greg. Her face paled as she read the messages. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "This," I said coldly, "is proof that you've been lying to me, that you've been sneaking around with Greg while pretending everything's fine." Lauren's mouth opened, but no words came out. As the silence stretched, Sarah stepped forward, crossing her arms. "How could you do this, Lauren? To him? To me?" Lauren's head snapped toward her sister. "What does that mean?" Sarah didn't flinch. "It means you're not the only one keeping secrets." Lauren's eyes darted between us, panic setting in. "What are you talking about?" Sarah glanced at me, her expression hardening. "You never appreciated Liam. Not the way you should have." "So I did." The color drained from Lauren's face. You're lying." "She's not," I said, my voice steady. "While you were busy running around with Greg, I found comfort somewhere else. With someone who actually cares about me." Lauren's breathing grew shallow, her hands clenching into fists. "You're disgusting," she spat, tears brimming in her eyes. "Both of you." "No, Lauren," I said, standing tall. "You don't get to play the victim here. This is all on you. You destroyed our marriage, not me." The fallout was swift and brutal. Lauren stormed out of the house that night, shouting curses as she slammed the door. I didn't try to stop her. Instead, I turned to Sarah, who gave me a sad smile. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded. "I will be." The divorce proceedings were messy, to say the least. Lauren fought tooth and nail, trying to paint me as the bad guy. She even dragged Sarah into it, accusing her of being a homewrecker. But the evidence I had, photos, texts, hotel receipts, painted a clear picture of who had really broken our vows. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me the better share of our assets. Lauren was left with little more than her pride, which had already taken a severe beating. But victory came at a cost. As satisfying as it was to see Lauren's lies unravel, the aftermath wasn't easy. The house felt empty without her, and even though Sarah and I tried to continue whatever we'd started, it quickly became clear that it wasn't sustainable. Our relationship had been born out of anger and revenge, not love, and it couldn't survive the weight of our shared guilt. Sarah moved on, and I was left to rebuild my life from the ground up. Months later, I found myself in a small apartment, far removed from the life I'd once shared with Lauren. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I started therapy, slowly working through the anger and betrayal that still lingered. Lauren and I haven't spoken since the divorce was finalized. From what I've heard, Greg didn't stick around, and Lauren is struggling to piece her life back together. Part of me feels sorry for her, but mostly, I feel free. The past is behind me, and for the first time in years, I'm looking forward instead of back. Goodbye.